The Hollow Grounds. In the small town of Blackwood, Virginia, the graveyard on the edge of town was older than the church itself. People called it the Hollow Grounds. The iron gates were warped, the gravestones crooked, and the soil never seemed still. Some nights, passers-by swore they saw a tall figure watching from the shadows, a thing with glowing green eyes. They called it the Watcher, the Dare. On Halloween night, 4 friends, Ben, Tyler, Megan, and Chloe, dared each other to sneak inside. The bet was simple: stay 10 minutes among the tombstones. Whoever ran first owed the others $50. Tyler climbed the rusted gate first, joking loudly to mask his nerves. "See? Just a bunch of rocks." But once inside, laughter felt wrong. The air was heavy, the silence absolute. Megan frowned. "It smells like dirt and rot." Chloe's flashlight shook in her hands. "It feels like the ground is moving." And it was. Each step sank slightly, as though the soil was breathing beneath them. The knocking. They stopped when a sound rose from the earth. Knock, knock. It came again from another grave, then another. Soon, dozens of muffled fists pounded from below. "Tell me that's not," Megan whispered. "Coffins," Ben said flatly, face pale. The knocking grew frantic. The dirt trembled. The Watcher, a figure, appeared between 2 leaning stones, tall, motionless, eyes glowing pale green. "Someone's here," Chloe stammered. The Watcher didn't move, but the graves split open around them. Hands, rotting, broken, burst through the soil. Corpses dragged themselves upright, mouths slack, eye sockets leaking black ooze. "Run!" Tyler screamed. The trap. They sprinted for the gate, weaving between crooked stones. The dead clawed at their clothes, their fingers cold as ice. Chloe stumbled. Megan pulled her up, but corpses closed in from every side. At the gate stood the Watcher, blocking their escape. His face stretched too long, his mouth carved into a jagged smile filled with black teeth. His voice was a chorus of whispers. "You entered uninvited. Now you belong to the Hollow," Ben charged, swinging his flashlight. It passed through the Watcher as if through smoke. From below, skeletal arms erupted, seizing Ben's legs. He shrieked as the earth swallowed him whole. Tyler tried climbing the gate, but corpses dragged him down, pulling until his screams vanished under dirt. Megan and Chloe clung to each other as the Watcher loomed closer. "Names carved in stone," he whispered. "That's all you'll be." The dead swarmed. Cold hands dragged them into the ground. Their last screams faded beneath the soil. The morning by dawn, the graveyard was silent again. The gates were shut, the gravestones crooked as ever. But 4 new markers now stood in the front row, freshly carved. Ben Carter, Tyler Hayes, Megan Ross, Chloe Daniels. And when the fog rolls over the Hollow Grounds, travelers still swear they see a figure standing there, tall, thin, with eyes glowing green, waiting.
The Dead of Hollow Creek. On the outskirts of Hollow Creek, Pennsylvania, sat an old cemetery no one visited after dark. Locals called it Riverside Graveyard, though the river had dried up decades ago. The iron gates sagged with rust, and the tombstones leaned like broken teeth. Every generation had stories. Some said they'd seen ghostly lanterns weaving through the graves. Others swore they'd heard whispers calling their names when the wind was still. But all agreed on one thing: if you stayed past midnight, you wouldn't leave at all. The graveyard's keeper, Ezekiel Crane, was a gaunt man with hollow cheeks and yellow eyes that seemed to glow faintly. He never came into town, and no one remembered a time before he was there. Some said he wasn't a man at all. The Dare. On a chilly October night, 4 college students, Jake, Ryan, Emily, and Sarah, decided to prove the legends wrong. Fueled by beer and bravado, they slipped through a gap in the cemetery fence just after midnight. Ryan grinned as he scanned the rows of stones with his flashlight. See? Just rocks and dead grass. No ghosts. But the deeper they walked, the colder it became. The air grew heavy, and even the insects were silent. Mist crept low across the ground, curling around their ankles. "This place feels wrong," Sarah muttered. Then came the sound, a faint scraping, like stone grinding against stone. The open grave. They followed the noise to a fresh mound of dirt. An open grave yawned before them, black and bottomless. Suddenly, thump. Something struck from beneath the earth. Emily's flashlight shook in her hand. "Jake, stop! I mean it!" Jake's face was pale. "That's not me!" The thumping grew frantic. Dirt shifted. Then, with a sickening crack, a gray hand burst through the soil, its nails broken, skin clinging to bone. The girls screamed as a corpse pulled itself from the ground, its jaw hanging crooked, its empty sockets fixed on them. The Keeper. Before they could run, a lantern glowed in the distance. Ezekiel Crane emerged from the mist, his face illuminated by the pale flame. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. His voice was cracked, ancient. "You've woken them." "Them?" Sarah gasped. Ezekiel raised his lantern and the light spread. All around them, graves shifted. Fingers clawed from the dirt. Faces twisted in rot dragged themselves free. "They don't like the living trespassing on their ground," Ezekiel said. His mouth curled into a smile far too wide. "But don't worry, soon you won't be among the living." The hunt. The 4 bolted, weaving through tombstones as the dead staggered after them. Their movements were slow, but there were too many, dozens, maybe hundreds, crawling from the earth. Emily tripped, scraping her knee. Ryan grabbed her, pulling her up just before skeletal hands clawed her sleeve. Ahead, the gate came into view, glowing in the moonlight. But Ezekiel was already there, lantern swinging, his yellow eyes gleaming. "You thought the graveyard was abandoned," he hissed, his voice layered with dozens of whispers. "But it is never empty. It is always hungry." The bell. The corpses surrounded them. Jake swung a broken headstone, shattering a skull, but more came, dragging themselves through the dirt. Ryan scrambled up the fence, his palms bleeding on the rusted spikes. He almost reached the top when skeletal arms burst from the ground, seizing his legs. His scream tore through the night as he was yanked down, swallowed by the soil. Emily clutched Sarah, sobbing. Jake turned toward Ezekiel just as the lantern's flame died. Darkness fell. Then a sound shook the night. Bong. A church bell. Deep, hollow, endless. The ground cracked open. Graves split wide. Pale hands wrapped around Jake's body, dragging him beneath the dirt. Emily and Sarah shrieked as shadows loomed over them. The bell rang again, and then silence. The next morning, when dawn came, Riverside Graveyard looked untouched. The gate was chained. The grave sat silent, but 4 new headstones had appeared overnight. The names were carved neatly in stone: Jake, Ryan, Emily, Sarah. At the far end, Ezekiel Crane walked slowly among the graves, humming a low, ancient tune. His lantern glowed faintly, though no fire burned within it. And for anyone who met his yellow eyes, there came a whisper carried on the wind. "The graveyard is never empty." The graveyard is hungry. The small town of Ravenwood had one rule everyone followed: never step inside St. Helena's Cemetery after dark. Children told stories of glowing eyes between the headstones, and elders swore they had heard voices calling their names from the graves. At the edge of town stood the cemetery gates, rusted and chained. Behind them stretched rows of crooked tombstones, the earth cracked and uneven. The graveyard's keeper, Ezekiel Crane, was a gaunt, shadowy figure with hollow cheeks and yellow eyes that seemed to shine in the night. He had been there longer than anyone remembered. Some said he was older than the town itself. "Stay out," the townsfolk warned. "The gate isn't locked to keep you out. It's to keep what's inside, in." The dare on Halloween night, 4 college friends, Jake, Ryan, Emily, and Sarah, were drunk enough to ignore the warnings. With whiskey bottles in hand, they dared each other to sneak into the cemetery after midnight. Ryan laughed as he slipped through a gap in the fence. "It's just a graveyard. Dead people don't walk." But the moment they crossed, the air grew colder, and the night went deathly silent. Even the crickets stopped. Mist crawled low along the ground, clinging to their ankles as they walked deeper among the graves. "This feels wrong," Sarah whispered. They shone their flashlights across rows of leaning stones, the beams catching names long forgotten. That's when they heard it, a low scraping noise, like stone grinding on stone. The open grave. The sound came from a fresh mound of dirt. No coffin, no marker, just an open hole. Then, thump. Something struck from below. The earth trembled. Emily froze. "Jake, that better be you." Jake's pale face shook in the flashlight glow. "It's not me." The knocking grew louder. The soil shifted, and suddenly a hand broke through. Gray, skeletal, nails torn and bloody. The girls screamed as the corpse pulled itself free, its jaw slack, its eyes empty black sockets. Ryan stumbled backward. "Jesus Christ!" The dead man clawed toward them, dragging its ruined body through the dirt. The keeper. Before they could run, a lantern light swayed between the graves. Ezekiel Crane appeared, his hunched frame outlined in the glow. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. His voice sounded dry, as if it hadn't been used in years. "You've woken them!" "Them?" Sarah gasped. Ezekiel raised his lantern. Around them, more graves cracked open. Fingers, arms, and faces pressed upward through the dirt. Dozens of corpses began to rise, staggering into the moonlight. "They don't like the living trespassing on their ground," Ezekiel whispered. His yellow eyes gleamed as his mouth stretched into a grin. "But don't worry. Soon, you won't be among the living." The chase. "Run!" Jake shouted. They bolted down the winding paths, weaving between crooked headstones. The dead lurched after them, their mouths open in silent screams, their stench choking the air. Emily tripped, her flashlight scattering. Ryan grabbed her, pulling her up just before skeletal fingers raked her arm. Ahead, the iron gate shimmered in the moonlight. Safety. But Ezekiel was already there. His lantern swung, casting grotesque shadows. "You thought this place was abandoned," he hissed, his voice layered with many others. "But the graveyard is never empty. It is always hungry." The bell. The corpses closed in. Jake snatched up a broken stone and smashed it into a skull, but more hands clawed from the earth. Ryan scrambled up the gate, his palms bleeding on the rusted spikes. He almost reached the top when skeletal arms burst from the ground, dragging him down screaming. The soil swallowed him whole. Emily sobbed as she clung to Sarah. Jake turned just in time to see Ezekiel's lantern flicker and die. Darkness devoured them. Then came the sound. Bong. A church bell, deep and hollow, echoing from beneath the earth. The ground cracked, graves split wide. Pale hands wrapped around Jake's legs, yanking him into the dirt. His screams cut off in an instant. Emily and Sarah clutched each other, trembling as shadows fell over them. The bell rang again, and then silence. The morning after, at dawn, the townsfolk found the cemetery calm. The gate was chained, the graves were undisturbed, but 4 new headstones had appeared, their names etched clearly in stone: Jake, Ryan, Emily, Sarah. At the far end, Ezekiel Crane walked slowly among the graves, humming a tune older than the town itself. His lantern swung gently in his hand, glowing without fire. And anyone who met his yellow eyes swore they heard a whisper, soft and hungry. The graveyard is never empty.